friends, I'm back with a very short tutorial, kind of a crash course on beginning watercolor. If you've been keeping up with the posts on Patreon and the emails that have been coming through, you'll know that all Patreon members will get something in the mail. Each package will have watercolor that you can experiment with, play with. If you're a beginning watercolor artist, if you've never picked up a brush, I wanted to show you how you can start. What you will need is some watercolor paper. You want it to be 140-pound weight. You'll need some water, a paintbrush. This one is the one that I learned with. It's the Princeton Snap round, I believe it's a size 6. A paper towel, watercolor, of course. I'm going to begin with a green and a pink, and yours will come similar to this. You can drop water, a little bead of water on top of your paint to get it activated, or what I usually do is I just mist it with a spray bottle. And then I let that sit for just a few seconds to get it activated. I wet my brush. I'm going to move this down here so that you can see what I'm doing. After your water has sat for a couple of minutes, go ahead and roll your brush on your paint. And we're just going to paint a square. If you find that your brush is too dry, go ahead and re-wet it. Add some water to it. I think I'm going to add a yellow because I like to mix colors that are next to each other on the color chart. So I'm going to add a yellow. I'm going to rinse my brush, and I'm going to go ahead and load it with paint. Okay, can you see that? And I'm just going to make another square. And I'm going to overlap the pink and the yellow. And I'm going to let the watercolor do what it wants to do. This technique is called wet on dry. Your brush was wet, your paper was dry. So we're going to go ahead and just play with that for a little bit. Let's try a circle. And see, my brush is kind of, I don't have enough paint, so I'm just going to reload my brush. Kind of roll it around. Get it good and saturated. I don't know if you can see that very well. Okay. And we're just going to color that in with our green. And where the colors touch, you get a really pretty bleed. If you can see up here, this is doing some really pretty stuff. Just play around. There's a technique you can practice that will help you when you're wanting to paint leaves. And you just use the tip of your brush. This is the tip of your brush. The fatter part is called the belly. This is called the base. So you are going to use the tip of your brush, very lightly stroke, and then you're going to press down to the belly of the brush and pull back up. And you're going to repeat this pattern. Rinse your brush, and then once you've practiced that a few times, let's try it again. Running out of paint, and since my paper is still wet, I can go back and drop paint over that water, and it'll stay within the confines of the water lines. Try not to pick your brush up, and then once you feel like you've got that down, you can do a leaf. You can even do one in a different color if you want and get that bleed if you touch. So this is fast crash course. So okay, so now there's another technique I want to show you called wet on wet. Going to do the same thing, only with a different technique. We're going to do a pink square, but first we're going to lay our water onto our paper. So we're going to draw a square with the water. We're going to load our brush with paint, and we're going to drop it on one of the outer edges. Okay, do you see how it's bleeding into the water? Let's go along the top. I'm having trouble seeing my water lines because of all the lighting I'm using for the video. So, go on the outside here. I'm going to re-wet my brush and get some more paint. It's a little bit wetter than the wet on dry. I'm doing wet on wet. So you can let it do what it wants to do, or you can encourage it to do whatever you want it to do. I kind of like to see what it's going to do on its own. And I'm going to draw another clean water square at the bottom here without touching the pink. Paint it with water. Grab some yellow, drop it in. Move it around to where you want it to be. And then I like to go ahead and get just a tad bit more water, just a tiny little bit. I could tell that I needed just a little just because my tip was so dry. And touch it like that. And let it do what it's gonna do. We're gonna do the same thing with the circles. Lay our clean water down. Paint it with water, drop in our color. What is so interesting to me is that the paint will not go outside of your water lines. I like to have depth and texture in my paint, so I like to have darker spots, lighter spots, white spots. So I like to just play with it a little. And then let's draw another circle. We're not going to touch it yet. We're just going to draw the circle and paint it in. And then when you've got it how you want it to look in the circle, just going to touch. That's a little too solid for me, so I'm going to dry my brush. Just kind of wipe it on your paper towel, and then I'm just going to pick some of that paint up with my brush, almost like an eraser would pick up pencil. When you start playing with it, you'll find things that you can do that work. Now that you know how to make a leaf, we're going to paint one with water and drop our color in. And this is one of my favorite things to do. So I'm going to go very lightly with the tip, push down with the belly of the brush and back up to the tip. Then I'm going to get my green and I'm going to drop it in and see where it goes. I'm going to go on the outline. Okay, I'm going to leave those white spots because what I want to do is I'm going to get another color. I'm going to come back in and I'm going to drop that color on one of those white spots. You could even do 3 colors if you have 3 colors at home. If not, just practice with the one that you have, even if it's not green. Okay, so I don't love this, so I'm going to get a little bit more green. And I'm going to come back in and just kind of define the one side. and the stem. And I'm just going to darken the edges. Not really going to change the shape of the leaf. I'm just going to drop color and define some places. See, isn't that pretty? Let's do another one. You can do two sides too of your leaf if you want. You see how the first one I did up here, and then I went back and I did another press down at the bottom. It just gives a different shape, and you'll see what I mean once I drop my color in. If your paint is drying, just drop more water into it. Let it activate the paint. Now I'm going to drop a little bit of pink at the tip this time, and also maybe on the edge here. I'm also going to extend the stem down a little. Okay, and maybe a touch of yellow. It kind of starting to look like a fall leaf, right? Like, okay, very, very pretty. So you can do all kinds of things. Just play with it and have fun. You can mix your techniques too. I just did a wet on dry over here for the small leaf. So you can definitely switch between wet on dry and wet on wet. Okay, that is your crash course for watercolor. I would love to hear that you have practiced and played with the watercolor that's coming your way. So please make sure to show me. Thank you so much for being here.